In this presentation, I will briefly outline my research plans for my upcoming fieldwork and talk to you about the questions and ideas I have for my research further on. So, as evident from the title of my presentation, Recasting, Resurgence, Mapping Mediations and Ethnography of an Emerging Millet Assemblage Among Indigenous Shifting Cultivators of Odisha, India, the research places on the center stage millets. This is the structure of my presentation today. I will introduce to you the category of millets and its relevance, then discuss certain important policy changes that have concerned the decline and revival of millets in the Indian context, and then talk about the importance and endurance of millets in marginal contexts, especially in Adivasi communities, and then discuss the larger context of the research project in which my individual project is situated, and then talk to you about the research questions I have to take to the field and how I plan to navigate the field further on. So millets are a wide range of cereals that describes mostly seeds from several taxonomically divergent species of grass. They are small seeded grasses that are domesticated and grown as cereal crops, mostly in India and Africa. What is significant is that these grasses are grown mostly in marginal agricultural areas and under agricultural conditions in which major cereals fail to produce substantial yields. There are many varieties of millets, but the major types are pearl millet or foxtail millet, proso, white millet, finger millet, and these are the major millets, and the minor millets include little millets, brown top millet, teff, fonio, etc. So, as quoted here, any discussion on South Asian subsistence, any research that is aimed to approach this issue cannot ignore millets because of its endurance and resilience in such contexts. So these are some of the names and of millets, the varieties, and you can see the country of origin. In India, especially, little millets, kodo, ragi, jowar, bajra are the prevalent varieties. Some pictures to make you familiar. Yes, so I now look at why millets are so significant. So millets have, recent scientific evidence have found that millets are nutri-cereals, which is a marked change from its erstwhile status of marginal grains or poor cereals, or cereals that only sufficed very marginal subsistence conditions. So we can, as we can see here, when we compare the nutritional value of millets with rice and wheat, it fares very well in terms of magnesium, zinc, calcium especially. So it has important implications in the perspective of nutrition and dietary concerns. Additionally, millets are extremely suitable for subsistence, small land agriculture, because they can grow in very dry conditions, very drought-like conditions. They require low water, they require low human management inputs and agricultural technology. In spite of all of these very important qualities of millets, they have continued to be restricted to subsistence cultivations until recently. Like I mentioned, the millets are very relevant and found mostly in indigenous communities and subsistence agricultures because of all of these qualities. And these are the qualities of millets that are now being heralded as miracle qualities or important qualities that can be solutions for climate change and food security. And as well as economic security, of course. So millets in India, if we look at the global cultivation figures, millets still figure in India as the highest if we look at the other countries. However, if we look at the statistics in India individually, we see that there have been a certain decline, a very significant one. One of the major reasons for this are policy changes, for especially the Green Revolution. So Green Revolution prioritized rice and wheat varieties, especially because these were the varieties, these were the crops that could be commercialized, that could be taken up by agrochemical companies, that could be more agricultural inputs could be administered to these crops, whereas millets did not require any such elaborate mechanisms of agriculture. So Green Revolution, before Green Revolution policies came to pass, in 1965 to 66, millets were cultivated in 36.9 million hectares. But after the Green Revolution, the cultivation of millets declined from 7.22 million hectares to 2.2 million hectares in the 1961 to 2009 period. So we see that Green Revolution has had an important impact, as well as the PDS, which is the public distribution system, which brought into subsidized distribution rice and other more starchy cereals, whereas the coarse grains or the millets were sidelined. So this is yet another statistic that shows that not just the production but also the consumption of millets declined. However, they did persist in the marginal context, in the context where they did not require significant inputs, or rather in the context where people related to millets in ways beyond subsistence and consumption. Here now we talk about the state of Odisha, where we see that historically millets have persisted in communities, as also researched in anthropology. Millets have constituted a significant nutritional palette of Adivasis, or the indigenous people of Odisha, and also they have endured in their ritual systems and their cultural practices, because millet has been an important socio-cosmic resource in their everyday lives. So I've already spoken to you about how millets have endured a decline, and then there has been a renewed interest, and Odisha Millet's mission is one of the policies that is symbolic of this renewed interest in millets. So this policy is trying to promote millets and bring it from the marginalized subaltern fields to the more mainstream societies. They are incentivizing the commercial sale of millets, which is very significant because this is the very first time millets are moving from consumption subsistent practices among the Adivasis, among the indigenous communities, to impulses of commercialization. And they are also, the Adivasis are selling the millets directly to the government. So this is the context in which we ask certain questions in our research. So my individual doctoral project is situated in the DFG project, From Poor Man's Food to Nutri-Cereals, Emergence of a New Millet Assemblage in Odisha, India, where we look at 3 case studies. We look at commercial farmers, we look at Adivasis, who are considered now the guardians of millets, and also we look at millets in food lifestyles in the urban context, because the Odisha Millets mission is trying to popularize millets, taking it to the urban context as well. So there is a translation of Adivasi cuisines or Adivasi seeds, and they are being transmitted to elsewhere elsewhere. So my research will look at this idea of the Adivasis being considered as the guardians or stewards or protectors of millets, because in the context that millets have declined, when the government wanted to constitute policies to bring them back, the people they envisioned to work with were the Adivasis, were the indigenous people, because they saw that millets could be found in their fields and in their cuisines, in their barns and tables, to an extent that was not found elsewhere in the mainstream societies. So Adivasis are being considered protectors of millets, and I want to complicate this understanding of Adivasis as guardians, because we must remember that there were policies which discouraged millets, the consumption and cultivation of millets, and now there are policies which are bringing it back and encouraging and promoting it. However, the Adivasis have persisted in their conservation attempts and practices. So I want to critically understand what have been the motivations that have endured all these policy changes, and how do they presently look at these policy interventions that the government and the state are bringing in and engaging them in. So I also want to look at how, I want to historicize the processes of millet cultivation in these areas and look at how millets have persisted and what have been the resilient practices of the Adivasis amidst the changing state policies. Literature suggests that there are these women called seed mothers or bihonoma who are present in every community, in every small Adivasi village, and they are the ones who take up the cause of seed conservation. And I want to understand how these networks are constituted, what motivations do they have in conserving millet varieties, and which varieties are being conserved, which are the varieties that have been lost out. How do these policies, government policies, prioritize between seeds, or which seeds which millet varieties do they even consider traditional? Which millet varieties are entering into the public distribution system, because this is interesting, as the public distribution system reinserts these millet seeds from the Adivasis back to their communities, because this policy is aimed at food security. The millet mission is also transforming certain Adivasi, the seeds that they derive from these Adivasis, to hybrid varieties. And they are further transforming millets into other products. So it's very interesting to see how these traditional seeds, as well as traditional food cultures of Adivasis around millets, interact with these newer cultures or newer millet products that are entering their ecosystems, and how do these products also bear an imprint of Adivasi cultures, and do they further translate into ideas of empowerment for the Adivasis, and furthermore, how do they also bring in questions of food sovereignty vis-a-vis food security. Millet cultivation is also a gendered practice. It involves women. It involves labor exchanges of women, as well as various kinds of ritual practices. So I want to look at how, if it's evident that certain millet seeds have been lost out, I want to understand how these losses have interacted or impacted ritual practices. Have ritual systems changed simultaneously with the change in millet cultures, or certain seeds waning or certain seeds coming back? How can government policies to bring back certain seeds of millets reintroduce certain rituals or community organizations? And even so, when government initiatives of community organizations are being popularized, to what extent does the Adivasi or the indigenous expression still endure in all of these community rituals or organizational practices? Broadly, I want to situate millets in the theory of assemblages, which looks at complex interactions between humans and non-human actors, and understand what meaning do people make of these miracle grains, as they are being called now. How do they interact with them? What material culture does it embody? What intersectionalities of caste, of class, of gender do they inflect? As well as how, as I already mentioned, do they contribute to the empowerment of subaltern people? So this is where I propose to do my field work. This is one of the planned areas. I may diversify further. This is the Koraput Plateau of Odisha. You can see in the map. I will begin my research in the Koraput block right in the center and move to the Lakshmipur block. I will work with the Konds, the indigenous community Konds, and also the Koyas who practice shifting cultivation of millets. I will, as I have already established contact with certain resource partners, collaboration partners who are working on the field, Sharanya Nayak, who's an activist, as well as a former development practitioner. She's a farmer herself, then officials from the Millet Mission, as well as certain individuals who work with the indigenous way of life and Adivasis. I want to participate in the various activities of the Millets Mission, such as the training programs. I want to understand what kind of skill development is envisioned for the Adivasi actors and how does it interact with their traditional knowledge systems. I want to also be a part of the Gram Panchayat meetings, which is a local self-governance system, and also the meetings of the various seed mothers or individuals who are concerned with the conservation of millets. So largely I will apply methodologies or methods of anthropology, ethnography, case studies, participant observation, but I will keep or I will attempt to not lose vision of how millets form the core of this research context and gives me the privileged view to understand the various socio-cultural equations, dynamics, as well as changes that are happening in this context, and perhaps help me to collaborate and script a story of change, resilience, and resurgence in Odisha. Thank you.